Isn't it amazing to keep listening to white men whine and complain about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
But here's the part where you all stop applauding everything I say. The truth about DEI is that although it's well-intentioned, it's mostly garbage, okay? It's kind of like the Black Little Mermaid. Just because racists hate it doesn't mean it's good. Over 900 studies have shown that DEI programs don't make the workplace better for minorities. In fact, it can actually make things worse because of the backlash effect.
Okay, so today we are going to be reacting to the Dr. Phil show, and he's doing an episode on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, before we react to the episode, let me lay the groundwork so we all are on the same page. What is DEI?
But what really is DEI, and why is it necessary? DEI is short for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here's a breakdown. Diversity is ensuring the representation of all identifiers across races, gender identities, sexual orientations, religions, political beliefs, socioeconomic statuses, and more. Equity is the fair treatment of all previously stated identifiers, making sure every person in the environment has the same opportunities, resources, and support. Inclusion is making sure that the space is comfortable and welcoming to every type of person present. Everybody should feel respected and valued.
So what DEI is essentially going for is to try to make the workforce mirror the demographics of the population. So to show you the goal of DEI, here is the American Bar Association. And they say, for example, 5% of all lawyers are African American, the same percentage as 10 years earlier. But the US population is 13.4% African American. So the goal of DEI is to have 13.4% of all lawyers be African American, mirroring the population. Now, one of the ways DEI tries to achieve diversity is by lowering standards that seem to be an obstacle for African American and minority people trying to get into the profession. Now, as an example, the state of Washington has eliminated the bar exam because not enough minorities were passing it to be qualified as lawyers.
In tonight's Fact or Fiction, we're looking into a recent headline you may have seen. It claims that you no longer have to pass the bar exam to become a lawyer in Washington state. And it's actually true. Last Friday, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled that lawyers can get a license foregoing the bar by participating in a 6-month apprenticeship and completing 3 courses. Proponents say the traditional bar exam isn't very effective and blocks marginalized groups from becoming attorneys.
Now this brings us to the criticism of DEI programs, lowering standards to achieve diversity. Elon Musk says it best.
I'm trying to understand your logic here when it comes to DEI because there's no actual evidence of what you're saying.
No, I said, so if the standards, like let's say, I think that particular thing was referring to surgeons. Let's say a surgeon is asked to, a surgeon in training is asked to do a series of operations under the supervision of a senior surgeon, and they get a bunch of those operations wrong. If that happens, and yet they are still approved to be a surgeon, the probability that someone will die, I think, at some point is high.
Now, another criticism of DEI is that it's a one-way street. There are professions where black people constitute the majority of workers in that field. For example, if you wanted to play professional basketball, over 70% of players in the NBA happen to be black. But now, according to DEI, that number should only be 13.4%. And nobody's talking about a lack of diversity in the NBA. Now, it's interesting to note most studies have found that DEI doesn't actually work. Over 900 studies. Here's Charlamagne the God again.
And it's not just you. Over 900 studies have shown that DEI programs don't make the workplace better for minorities. In fact, it can actually make things worse.
So now that you know what DEI is, what some of the criticisms are, let's go into the Dr. Phil episode. But first, let me introduce you to the players. This is Rachel Kargas, and she is a proponent of DEI.
I really don't want to come off as a white savior. As somebody with privilege, as a white woman, it is easier for me to speak up in an organization because there is usually going to be less bias towards somebody who looks like me. So when I hear that DEI is sort of a liberal agenda, that goes back to the fact that DEI is not charity work. Businesses are helping them get in touch with their customers, they're improving their employer brand, and they're able to be more creative and innovative based on their diverse population. I have a hard time accepting that anyone thinks that these are negatives DEI is about building more inclusive processes. To me, the idea of no DEI, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Now, on the other side, you have Pastor James Ward, who's going to tell you that DEI is essentially nonsense and it's racism by another name.
Okay, so
Preach on, brother.
yeah. Well, a few things. If DEI works anywhere, it has to work everywhere. Let me tell you where DEI does not work. The NBA and the NFL. Where are the Asian, Latino, and Hispanic basketball and football players? Where are the black guys in the National Hockey League? Those businesses are performance-based.
Now, this part of the interview is very interesting. See, Rachel is going to say that DEI works and is going to quote a study. But the study she quotes actually says DEI doesn't work. And watch her try to spin her way out of that problem.
Does DEI work?
Yes, I have seen tremendous success in.
Are you aware there are 100 studies that suggest that it doesn't work?
There are also studies show that it does work. If you look at the Harvard
But
Business
those are
Review,
done.
Deloitte.
Well, let's look at the Harvard Business Review because they actually did a study.
Now, I'm pausing it right here because I don't think she was prepared for Dr. Phil to actually have read the study and is about to quote back to her because you saw how she tried to sneak that in. Oh, there's other studies like the Harvard Business Study. He's like, what are you talking about? I have the Harvard Business Study. And here's what it says.
The study found that over 5 years, 800 plus businesses consistently lost diversity in their managers, that no improvement in the proportions of white women, blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, and the participants feel external power trying to control their behavior.
Mm-hmm. So I can only lean on my experience. So I've worked for 13 different companies throughout the course of my career.
So what Rachel has just done here is employ a logical fallacy known as anecdotal. Now, it's when someone uses their personal experience or an isolated example instead of a sound argument or compelling evidence. So Dr. Phil said, hey, we have all these scientific studies from Harvard that says this thing doesn't work. And she, in response, says, well, hey, I worked at 13 jobs and it worked here. So 100 studies from Harvard and all these other places versus her personal experience working at certain companies. Now, Dr. Phil brought in Professor Erec Smith, who promotes equity, merit, and colorblindness, essentially saying, let the cream rise to the top, like in the NBA. They don't look at your race. They say, can you play? In NFL, can you play? So that is what he's promoting. He says we should move DEI to the side and promote equity, merit, and colorblindness.
You say that we're told demanding merit hurts minorities. Why is that being taught? Why is that being preached?
Well, it's being preached because people think that minorities don't have the same opportunities to acquire the same education as white people. Also, in oversimplification, what we should do then is not get rid of merit. We should help those students acquire those resources. I need to say this, Dr. Phil. Contemporary DEI cannot work without what's called prescriptive racism. And what is that? It's when you have a script, basically, a list of things that a person of a particular race is supposed to abide by. And if he doesn't, he is considered inauthentic or defective. You get this from Black people as well as white people, right? In fact, contemporary DEI cannot stand without prescriptive racism. It is prescriptive racism.
Now, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't play Rachel's response to that criticism that DEI is essentially prescriptive racism. So this is how she's going to explain how DEI is a good thing.
There's a great visual of a short person and a tall person, and they're both looking over a fence, and they have the same block to stand on. And the tall person, of course, can see over the fence, but the short person has not been lifted up enough to see over the fence. And so when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're talking about the fact that some demographics come to the table and have to overcome racism, unconscious bias, misogyny. And so how do we help level the playing field?
Now, what she just said sounds good, but if you just took 1 second to think about how this would work in the real world, let's take, for instance, the NBA. The average player height in the NBA is 6'7". Where's the equity in that? How can you now force someone who's, let's say, 5'2" to now have a position in the NBA as a basketball player? That wouldn't work, right? That would actually destroy the NBA product. There's no way you can make that equitable for everybody. Unfortunately, in real life, there are winners and losers. Now, what she's actually advocating for is equality of outcome. Think about it this way. LeBron James is 6'8". He plays in the NBA. He makes, let's say, $200 million playing basketball. But if DEI goes into effect, you would have someone who's 5'2" and Asian come into the NBA and make the same amount of money as LeBron James. Equality of outcome. And that's essentially Marxism. But that's what she's advocating for. Equality of outcome. Listen to Dr. Phil Kohler out.
Okay, so that means you're trying to create equality of outcome. That's what I hear you saying about playing God.
Yeah.
How do you create equality of outcome when people aren't the same? You're right. Some people are shorter, some people are taller looking over that fence. They can't both play in the NBA.
Right.
You can't create equality of outcome. What gives a DEI program the right to come in and try and alter the nature of things to create equality of outcome? That's been tried. That didn't work. That was called Marxism.
What I would say is that, I've been in the recruiting space for 25 years. And the way we have done recruiting traditionally relies heavily on things like networks, referral programs. And so who are we going to refer? We're going to refer the people that we know who are in our neighborhoods or who play golf with the CEO. And so you start to have a population in your organization that looks very much the same.
Is that the way it works in the NBA? Or the people who are playing golf with the owners, the next star player? Or is it about merit? Right? Is it about merit? Because that's the one thing she didn't say in her response. She said nothing about the merit of the employee. So let me know if you are pro DEI. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section, because I think DEI is essentially racism by another name. Now, again, I could be educated. I may not be seeing the full picture here, but to me, I believe if you try to force diversity down people's throats, it's not going to work. And you have to do it in a way where you have to force the NBA to be diverse. You'd have to force the NFL to be diverse. And those are jobs that are strictly based on merit. Now, I think the issue when it comes to not having enough black lawyers and black doctors is trying to convince the younger generation that those jobs are worth investing in and going into. I didn't become a lawyer because someone told me you should become a lawyer. I became a lawyer because I was interested in the profession. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to show the younger generation that there's value to becoming a lawyer. Right now, in the black community, the value is becoming a rapper, basketball player, NFL star. That's why you see those spaces dominated by black and brown people. Now, as always, tell me that I'm some right-wing lunatic who doesn't understand diversity in the comment section. Or if you agree with me, let me know why. Because right now, I'm going to say it one last time. This is racism by another name. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'm going to see you next time. Peace.